And Mr. Big Voice, thank you very, very much. Apparently, he had a good weekend. He's back as well. So am I. That's a wonderful thing. Every time I get up in the morning and realize I've been granted another day, you get to a certain age, you just say, "Thank you, Lord," and then you go through the day and try to do the best that you can in appreciation for that gift. Some of the things we're going to be talking about today, and let me tell you, the program might get a little intense a little later in the show, simply because, well, by the 9 o'clock hour, we should start having some releases from the Supreme Court of the United States about decisions made. There's five major cases before the court that we're waiting on. Two of those, especially, are getting a lot of attention. The future of Obamacare riding on one of these decisions, as well as perhaps the federal government now recognizing same-sex unions with the decision that could come, and that could open the gates across the country, throughout all 50 states, when it comes to those marriages that have been taking place in some parts of the country for the last few years. So we've got those things coming up a little later. Also, if you grab a pen or pencil, I want to share with you some telephone numbers, because there's going to be another big vote today coming up on the Pacific Trade Agreement. And yes, a friend of mine wrote me over the weekend, and he keeps reiterating. He said he's been a lifelong, well, he calls himself conservatarian. In other words, a hybrid of a conservative and a libertarian. And he said the Republican Party has let him down far more often than the Democrats have. And I sometimes feel that way myself too, even though I've been a registered Republican for a very, very long time, is that sometimes these people get on board. And Pat Buchanan was telling, if you heard Sean Hannity's program early last week here on KLIX, Pat Buchanan was saying simply Republicans are on board with all of these trade agreements because they're less concerned about the votes that they'll get or won't get than they are about the campaign cash they're getting from the people who favor these trade deals, which, of course, move your jobs overseas, even though they say free trade is good. This is not free trade. This is a very unbalanced playing field, and they're going to be giving away the store if they end up voting for this. What is it? Buchanan says we've had 50,000 factories close in 15 years. Ouch. It's 8:09. Bill Colley with you this morning on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Over the weekend, a little excitement. My sister lives 7 miles. Well, it's my hometown, too. I grew up there. Haven't lived there in 30-some years. But my sister lives 7 miles west of Friendship, New York, where they thought the two escaped convicts happened to be. But then a friend of mine he runs a TV station in Buffalo, New York, said, look, everybody from Allegheny County looks like they're a prison convict. And, having grown up there, I do resemble that remark, I suppose. But now they say that it was not the two people that they're looking for, that they are still very close to the prison where they escaped from. So that may be breaking anytime soon as well, because they've really narrowed down the area in Franklin County, New York, not Allegheny County, New York, where they think these people may be. We may be talking, I don't know, because her schedule is going to get very busy. Kaylee Wright has now been named Miss Idaho. She's a frequent guest on our program. She'll be taking part in Patriots Night coming up in a couple of weeks as well as the Mistress of Ceremonies. If she's not too busy today, she may be popping in for a few minutes in the next hour as well. She's going to be going to the Miss America pageant. That's the next step for her. And I really want to say congratulations. And this is also a nod to her family, too, as well, because they've all made great sacrifices to get to this point. So there's a number of things we'll be talking about. Randy Staples coming up a little bit later. Also, we'll be talking pest control a little bit later. Some of these other things this morning. Over the weekend, Karl Rove happened to be on a TV program, and Karl Rove said something that has caught the attention, especially of American liberals. They think that he is calling for a repeal of the Second Amendment. Now, liberals hate the guy. Actually, so do conservatives. But now that the liberals believe he has actually agreed with them on this issue, he's wonderful, and they're turning around saying to all of the people on the right, well, gee willikers, if Karl Rove says it, then you've all got to agree with him, because you all walk in lockstep with Karl Rove and Rush Limbaugh. They think for you, don't they? Because we liberals know that they have to think for you, because otherwise you'd be free-thinking liberals like us and realize liberalism is a self-evident truth. So after reading about this online last night and wondering, did Karl Rove really throw everyone on the American right under the bus? Did he throw constitutionalists under the bus? I tracked down the tape from the program. It was on Fox News Sunday yesterday. He was answering a question from Chris Wallace. This is actually what Karl Rove had to say.
We've come a long way. Now, maybe there's some magic law that will keep us from having more of these. I mean, basically, the only way to guarantee that we would dramatically reduce acts of violence involving guns is to basically remove guns from society. And until somebody gets enough oomph to repeal the Second Amendment, that's not going to happen. I don't think it's an answer. I think.
See that? See that? He said, I don't think it's an answer. He said, unless someone gets enough oomph to remove the Second Amendment, repeal the Second Amendment. But then he says, I don't think that's an answer. So there you go. Lefty, you pretty much twisted his words around to your own purposes. But again, it's one of your half-truths or outright lies in order to try and push forward or move forward your agenda. There was a march in Ketchum over the weekend. Some people who actually have permits, that means legally can carry their firearms, marched down the street, Main Street of Ketchum, and they went to the local newspaper office, which was locked away because they were afraid that somehow these violent constitutionalists would storm the building and smash the printing presses and fill the walls with lead. Of course, it was a very peaceful protest. That didn't happen, of course, over the weekend. And then Washington Times today reporting that the President of the United States is going to do his best with or without Congress. Now, this is a man who has tried to rule by fiat since he was elected. That is, by divine right. That is, as a monarch, as a king. In other words, if the courts and the Congress don't go along with him, and those are co-equal branches of government, well then, dang them, he's going to go ahead and do whatever he wants. Also, that Times story says at the state level, gun control advocates are advancing gun regulations in at least 31 state legislatures. For you public school graduates, that's more than half of the United States. And here's a quote. Without a doubt, President Obama is making good on his promise to use his phone and his pen to circumvent Congress and the will of the American people. That came from the National Rifle Association's Institute for Legislative Action in a statement prior to the shootings in Charleston. We also have a lot of people now claiming that we have to take down the Confederate flag that flies in a park outside the South Carolina State Capitol building. Because apparently people drive by and they see that flag and then they feel motivated to go out and shoot people. Well, that's the argument they're making, isn't it? The argument is that these people are out there and they suddenly see that flag, and that's the St. Andrew's cross on the flag. That's from Scotland originally. I have a friend, he actually has a Scottish flag on the front end of his pickup truck, and people have accused him of having the Confederate flag there. Excuse me, but the St. Andrew's cross is blue on a white background. There's no resemblance other than the fact they used the same design. The Confederate flag was a bit more decorative, and in fact there were multiple Confederate flags. Can we point that out as well? A couple of years ago when we had a big race going on, a big NASCAR race, and they brought out the old General Lee. You may remember that car from a popular but not really very good TV show in the late 1970s and early 1980s. They brought the car out, but they removed the Confederate flag from the roof. So you have all of these people saying, we must get rid of that Confederate flag because people see it, and all of a sudden they go stark raving mad and they start shooting up things. Excuse me. Can anybody out there who's demanding that this flag be taken down, and the argument being even made by Mitt Romney, and he's been making it for years, he's one of the few Republicans who makes the argument, is that it should be taken down and put somewhere in a museum. But can anyone, all of you liberals out there listening today, and I know you do, can any of you tell me if there is actual causation here? Where is your evidence that looking at that flag causes people to go out and shoot things up? I did watch a few episodes of Dukes of Hazzard. My friend Dwayne Glover, one of my best friends from high school, was a fan of the program. And if he was over at my house or vice versa, he'd have the program on TV. I would see that flag on the top of the automobile, and all I could ever think was, how does that automobile driving on a dirt road squeal its tires? Never looked at that flag and said, come, we must go shoot at people. Or it's also like the goofball who calls the program and claims that talk radio forces people to commit acts of violence. All right, Rush Limbaugh has been doing talk radio for a little over 30 years, doing it on the national level for almost 30 years. Again, where's your evidence? Where's your evidence that someone listening to Mark Levin or Sean Hannity or Glenn Beck or any local program has done this? Actually, it's quite the reverse. Alan Berg, talk show host in Denver, was killed by people listening to his show. And so I want to raise those questions. Where is your evidence? 816. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX 66. And we have our first caller this morning. You're on the air.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. On that Confederate flag, I'm very strong. I'm not a Southerner. I'm not a bigot. But the Confederate flag is part of American history. We should keep that. They fly Mexican flags in this country, Islam flags, all other countries' flags. Nobody complains. And that's part of our history is the Confederate flag.
Well, and I thank you for the call. I have an old girlfriend who's got English ancestry, and she flies what's called the Union Jack, which, of course, was an oppressive flag. It was called the Union Jack because, of course, the English took over Scotland and Ireland and then designed one flag to try to force them into the Union as a symbol of that forced union. And then, of course, the British fought 2 wars against this country when it was young, killing a lot of Americans. So I guess she's guilty of hate, too, as well, by the same logic. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story at 818.
Okay. With that same logic, if they want to do that, which is part of our history, like it or not, good or bad, it's part of our history, then Al Sharpton and Reverend Wright should be put up too, because it's a fact. Every time they show up somewhere and agitate, things get burnt down and people do get shot.
Yeah, the body count behind Sharpton is a long one.
It's huge. So why don't we put him up or shut him up or put him in jail where he belongs for all his tax evasions and everything else? But if I did, I would be behind bars. Well,
in Sharpton's case, I guess the liberal argument is this is part of his reparations check. So the number of bodies behind him is irrelevant. It's paying him off.
The problem is more bodies drop behind him, the more does his bank account goes up. And that is just wrong.
Amen. Couldn't when you make an argument like that and point out that Sharpton, Howard Beach is a good example. There's at least 2 people dead there. Over the weekend, there was a church shooting. Did you hear about this one? The shooter happened to be a person of color. Oh, and he also kidnapped somebody who was at the church. Have you heard about that? Where is your media on that one? Have they gone AWOL? Well, yes, apparently they have. Oh, I had to laugh. The local newspaper had a comment about that march in Ketchum. And the writer, I think they have, 2 or 3 reporters over there? The editor's bragging that we couldn't survive and talk radio without copying news from them, but I rarely ever actually look at this. There's so many websites out there anymore devoted to various topics. The websites are reminiscent of newspapers back in the day before electricity, when people were burning down their homes with kerosene lamps, and you might have a dozen newspapers in each community. Well, the winnowing effect is going on in online as well. So for all the claiming that we couldn't get by without them, we will be shortly because, well, you won't be in business. But the writer, I guess, again, she's one of 3 maybe over there, maybe 2, says America's gun culture is back in the spotlight after the shooting at the South Carolina church. What is America's gun culture? Well, it means it's not your liberal culture. So we've got to make that point clear. 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Got a guest coming up talking about pest abatement in just a few minutes. 65. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on NewsRadio1310.com.